Today is what happened there? Okay. As mentioned before, today is the last Sunday, so it is the question and response. So we say response and not answer because sometimes I don't have the answer, so I'll just respond to your question. But thank you everyone for submitting your questions for today. We went through them, and Reverend Yukimi sent me some of the questions that he has not yet answered. Very good questions. They have some sort of high-level like Buddhist terms and some that take a little bit of explanation. So I hope everyone woke up this morning ready to hear an academic lecture, because that's what you're getting today. Yay, right? Yay, learning. All right, complicated things. All right, so if you're falling asleep, it's fine. So question and response. The first one are, why are flower petals dropped by ministers during chanting during special services? So recently we had a joint service with the district, and we had some special chanting that we don't typically do. If you notice, we had these sort of like trays that we're carrying, and then we had these flower petals. So they aren't real flower petals. They were made by our Dharma school students. Very nice. They had little drawings and everything on them. And so at that time, everyone was able to participate, but sometimes, it'll just be the ministers. So originally, there was fresh lotus petals that were used, I guess, in India. And this tradition goes through China and then into Japan. And so the way the Japanese pronounce the scattering of flowers is sange. So the reason why we do it is actually it comes from the sutras. So when the Buddha attained enlightenment, it said that the celestials, or the devas, or heavenly beings, whatever you want to translate that as, they scattered flowers from the heavens. And also, when the Buddha would go and visit different towns, so he was a sort of wandering monk, wandering ascetic, going around teaching. Whenever he would come into town, people would offer and scatter flowers. So this was an offering, for one thing, like we have flowers up on the altar, we give flowers. But it's also this symbol to pay homage, to sign of respect, and it's also a gift signifying our joy. So we're happy that the Buddha's coming, we're happy to receive the teachings, and because of that, we scatter the flowers. So of course, anyone can do this. There is sort of two ways, I guess, Reverend Yuki taught us how to drop the flower petals. So one way is I think he said you take your index and your middle finger and your thumb, and you take one of the petals and you can just drop it. So that's one way. Or you can kind of like toss it. And so that one's kind of more fun, and you can kind of see it flying. But anyway, so those are the two ways to do it. And they are called keha, so that's the Japanese pronunciation for those flower petals that we use. Good question. All right, so the next one. Why do we walk down the center aisle toward the Buddha, but then on the sides when we walk away? So someone said they noticed that when people come towards the Naijin, the altar area, come towards the Buddha, they'll come down this center aisle. However, people don't go back the center aisle, right? They make a conscious choice to go to the sides and then go back down the sides. And there is a reason for this. So you're not supposed to turn your back on the Buddha. I mean, you're not supposed to turn your back on like the Buddha, like Buddhism, but also just like physically, you're not supposed to turn your back on the Buddha. So ultimately, what it is to be mindful and respectful. So, if you end up turning your back on the Buddha, it's not like you're going to get some bad juju or something like on you, like that kind of thing is not going to happen. But, just like bowing when you enter the hondo, it's this sign of respect, and nothing bad is going to happen to you if you don't do it. Really, it's for us, ourselves, right, to be mindful of how our attitude is, if we're going in with an open mind, if we're going with respect, if we're happy to be here, and maybe we're not, and so it'll help us kind of reset, because if you have kind of a rushed morning, or you had traffic, or something bad happened today, and you're coming in, but then, coming in, then you can kind of change your mindset, because you're trying to be mindful of how you're thinking and how your attitude is. So the same thing, when you're coming down the aisle and you're paying respect to the Buddha, it's all in the mindset. It's not because anyone else is going to judge you for it, but for your own sort of practice to be mindful of being respectful to the teachings. This comes from, though, a custom in East Asia, Southeast Asia, where turning your back and showing the soles of your feet is seen as respectful. So if you were to meet somebody who is, perhaps of like high status or something, you don't want to like show them your back or show them The bombs are for feet for some reason. Yeah, just to show that we're grateful, that we show our appreciation, and if you have to like kind of turn your back on the Buddha, I guess what you're supposed to do is supposed to like back up first like a little bit, and then you can turn, and that's okay. So again, we're just trying to get into the mindset of being very aware of not just our actions, but the state of mind that we're in. Okay, so this last one is the difficult one. What is your perspective on Mappo and why is it important? So first, to explain what this term Mappo is. So this comes from a theory that was given by Buddhist philosophers about the theory of Dharma ages. So in Buddhism, we're taught, right, the two I's of interdependence and impermanence, and impermanence applies to all things, including the sharing of the Dharma. So the Dharma exists, right? The Buddha was able to expound it, was able to teach it to other people, and then after that, those people tried to memorize it and teach it to other people as well. But over time, eventually, that also is subject to impermanence. Obviously, it's changed over the thousands of years it's existed, but also it's going to eventually erode into nothingness. So it occurs in stages with varying time frames depending on who you're talking to or what you're reading. So some people say that each one will last 500 years, some will say 1,000 years, and then some have to come up with this like crazy number according to different calculations. But what's important is that there's 3 stages. So the first one being the true stage, the second one being the semblance stage, and the last one being the final stage. So the true Dharma age is during the time of the Buddha, and like I said, depending on the time frame that you're using, a period after that, so a couple hundred years or something after, and that's when the Buddha's disciples, they could uphold the teachings correctly, and many of them attained enlightenment. So that was like kind of the best age to live in. The next one is the semblance age, which I had to kind of look up, the definition of semblance, because it's not a word I use very often, but I guess like it means that something looks like something else, especially when it's not. Right? Like, so it's sort of this like facade or deceptive, but it's this supposedly the reflection which resembles the true Dharma. So the teachings still exist, but only a few people could really correctly practice it. And even though they practice it, nobody attained enlightenment. So now in the final Dharma age, as you see kind of this pattern, right? Only the teachings remained, and no one can practice correctly, and none could attain enlightenment. So this is supposed to be this like degenerative age of the Dharma, and it's, the teachings exist, but because of the sort of selfish, foolish, or like evil ways of the people that exist at that time, no one attained enlightenment. There's also this kind of interesting but weird like cosmology of how we are as like beings. Where like supposedly we came from beings that lived for like 10,000 years, and the only things that they had to worry about was like eating and sleeping, but everything else was like taken care of, and there was no unhappiness. And then over time, the lifespans got shorter, we got more problems, we started more infighting, and then now we're like, oh, we only live like 100 years. So what's important about this is its influence on Shinran. So Shinran truly believed that he lived during the final Dharma age, that he lived during Mappo. And this came from his own experience with Buddhism. First, having his parents, pass away, and then going to the temple, kind of living in this time where that was possible, but then also studying Buddhism on Mount Hiei for 20 years, and then not finding that he had not made any spiritual progress, or at least the ones that he had wanted to, expected to, or what was expected of him. So because he couldn't make any progress, it really made him feel like it was unable to achieve this kind of obviously enlightenment, but then even the progress that he wanted to do. So because of those experiences, he believed that he lived in Mappo. So from his own words, he says, "I know truly how grievous that it is that I, Gotoku Shinran, am sinking in an immense ocean of desires and attachments, and am lost in a vast mountain of fame and advantage, so that I rejoice not at all at entering the stage of the truly settled, and feel no happiness at coming nearer to the realization of true enlightenment." How ugly it is, how wretched. So he looks at himself and he sees that he has this sort of like fame and advantage in his position, being a monk who got some kind of following, has some stature because of the Nembutsu teaching that he was trying to distribute. But in spite of all that, he was still this being of desires and attachments, which you're supposed to get rid of throughout Buddhism. And then even through the Nembutsu teaching, he was getting closer to enlightenment. His enlightenment was assured because of the 18th vow, the 48 vows. And because of all that, he was sort of like disgusted with himself, like, oh, so terrible. I'm a terrible person. But the solution to this, of us being these imperfect beings, was through the Nembutsu teaching. And he wrote these hymns based on his experience, his learning, his teaching, and it kind of shows his line of thinking, which ended up getting him to this point where he could accept that. So he says, we may think that these times belong to the right Dharma age, but in us, the lowest foolish beings, there is no mind that is pure, true, or real. How could we awaken to the aspiration for enlightenment? The aspiration for enlightenment through self-power taught in the path of sages is beyond our minds and words. We foolish beings, ever sinking in transmigration, how could we awaken it? Under the guidance of Buddha, who appeared in this world 3 times the sands of the Ganges in number, we awakened the aspiration for supreme enlightenment, but our self-power failed, and we continued to transmigrate. So he's kind of saying here that we think that we're in the right age, that we could do the practice, that we could achieve enlightenment, but actually, we can't. And even though we can't, the guidance in the Buddha has tried to push us that way, and through the path of the sages, so the Theravada way, we couldn't do it. He continues, with the advent of the semblance and last Dharma ages, this world of the 5 defilements, the teachings left by Shakyamuni entered into concealment. Only the compassionate vow of Amida becomes widely known, and attainment of birth through the Nembutsu spreads. Of the vows embraced as supreme and all-surpassing, selected through the 5 kalpas of profound thought, the vows of immeasurable light and life were made in the foundation of the working of great compassion. So here, concerning the aspiration for supreme enlightenment and the Pure Land path, we are urged to realize the mind that seeks to attain Buddhahood. The mind that seeks to attain Buddhahood is itself the mind that seeks to save all sentient beings. So here, Shinran is equating this mind that seeks to save all sentient beings with the mind that seeks to attain Buddhahood. So as a Buddhist, as someone who's on the path to enlightenment, we have, at the same time, this mind that seeks to save all sentient beings. What am I doing? Okay. So, I don't know, that was kind of a lot. Is everyone okay? Is everyone okay? All right, yeah? Oh, all right, that's pretty good. Okay, so we'll continue. So, my own appreciation of this is just like how Shinran came to the realization himself, all of us need to make the decision for ourselves if we are also foolish beings. So this is not to say you have to go to like a Buddhist mountain and study it for 20 years and realize you can't do anything. Like he did that for us, so we don't have to do that. But essentially, all of us have to decide for ourselves as Buddhists, right? Like we're on this path, we're supposed to be going towards enlightenment. Is it something that I think that I can do, or am I going to have to let go of my ego and rely on Amida? So on top of that, or no, also along with that, parallel with that, there was supposed to be these signs of chaos, destruction, hate, and violence during Mappo. So the world's supposed to be going crazy. And for him, that's what he felt. There was times of great war, of great famine. The lifespan was very, very short. And so because of that, he felt like he was in this terrible time. However, for myself, I feel like it could apply to really any time throughout history. The people at the time probably thought it was terrible. Like, I don't think there's any time during human existence where everyone's like, oh, this is great. Like, this is the best time in human history. Everything is going just fine. Like, there's always terrible things happening. So no matter what kind of age you live in, it'll feel like the last Dharma age. Finally, so this decision to follow the path is predicated on our choice to reject this world. And so what I mean by that is not that you should kind of turn your back on everything in this world, but rather it's this sense of morality that we have within sort of human interaction typically. So to kind of flesh that out, Shinran wrote this letter, and this is from a collection of letters called The Lamp for the Latter Ages. And he says, in people who have long heard the Buddha's name and said the Nembutsu, surely there are signs of rejecting the evil of this world and signs of their desire to cast off the evil in themselves. When people first begin to hear the Buddha's vow, they wonder, having become thoroughly aware of the karmic evil in their hearts and minds, how they will ever attain birth as they are. To such people, we teach that since we are possessed of blind passions, the Buddha receives us without judging whether our hearts are good or bad. When, upon hearing this, a person's trust in the Buddha has grown deep, he or she comes to abhor such self and to lament continued existence in birth and death, and such a person then joyfully says the name of Amida Buddha, deeply entrusting himself to the vow. That people seek to stop doing wrong as the heart moves them, that people seek to stop doing wrong as their heart moves them, although earlier they gave thought to such things and committed them as their minds dictated, is surely a sign of having rejected this world. So this term of rejecting this world is kind of, I don't know, not a misnomer, but it's a little bit confusing. And essentially what it is you reject this sort of morality that exists in the world for people that normally think about good and evil, or how we typically would think about good and evil. As Shinran mentioned, from the Buddha's point of view, it doesn't matter if we've done good things or bad things, how we would naturally think about it. The Buddha accepts all people as they are. So playing on this idea of sort of a different morality, if we are able to reject this kind of conventional good and evil and try to realize this compassionate understanding of accepting all beings like the Buddha does, then that would be the sign of rejecting this world. Does that make sense? A little bit? Okay, that one, we're a little bit shaky. That one, okay. Do I have any other examples? No, I don't. That's the end of the slideshow. Okay, so perhaps to explain this a little bit, Shinran had to deal with a problem which we reference as like licensed evil. So if we are supposed to reject, or let's see, how am I supposed to explain this? Okay, so like if Amida Buddha accepts you, whether you're good or bad, whether you do good things or bad things supposedly, then like we should show, there's a group of people that said we should show our faith by purposefully doing bad things. And then it's like, look how much I want Amida to save me. I'm doing all these terrible things. And so they would do bad things and like sign this license to, steal stuff or hurt people or do whatever, right? But this is still within this morality of good and evil, which people kind of adhere to, right? So we say like, yeah, stealing things is bad, like you shouldn't do that. And so if you were to steal something, doing bad, if you were to have stolen something in the past, then Amida would still accept you. However, to know that it's bad, and to know that it hurts other people, but to continue to do it would be to still decide that these are two different, good and bad things, which is separate from Amida kind of accepting everybody. So you're not rejecting this world, you're still playing within the same rules of good and evil, instead of trying to step back and looking at it as it's all the same. Amida accepts everybody. Maybe? Did that make it worse? Yeah? All right. I don't know. Does anyone have any specific questions about that might help me flesh it out? No, just crazy. All right. Well, anyway, that's why Mappo is important. So, yeah. To sum it up, that Shinran had this feeling that he lived in this age where he couldn't make this spiritual progress. He had to let go of his own he calls it self-power, but this ego that he could do it himself, and to accept Amida's vow, accept the Nembutsu teaching as the only reason why he would be able to attain enlightenment, not in this life, of course, but in the next one, because we are attached to this body still, and so it only happens after we're into the next life. And so in doing so, it allowed him to then practice Buddhism to exist in this sort of last Dharma age. And so being able to be a being who was full of blind passions, of being attachments, of the five defilements, you could exist like that and still attain enlightenment eventually through this teaching. And what happens is it awakens something in us when we have this realization. So that's what I think was important, at least for me, and my understanding of Jodo Shinshu, is that there is this kind of change that happens in people where if you, like he said, you say the Nembutsu, if you listen to the teachings, if you come to temple, then something is going to change if you let it, into your heart. And what happens is you start to awaken this mind of being compassionate for all beings. So in realizing that we live in this age where it's impossible to attain enlightenment, you actually become more compassionate, that you try to care for other beings. And it starts, though, with this realization of ourselves, of realizing that we're not perfect and that we can't do it on our own. So it only when you can have that sort of realization, that vulnerability, you open it up and you let the Nembutsu teaching in, then it starts to change you. And then there's these signs of you changing, essentially. So if someone comes to a temple for a long time and they don't seem any different, then something's wrong with them. But supposedly, if you go to temple a lot and you listen to the teachings, then you'll have this kind of change. And you can see the person be like, oh, wow, look, they go to temple a lot, or they like the teachings a lot, they listen to it. So anyway. Was that good? All right, that was better. Okay, yeah. I don't know. That's how I was taught, right? Was all the teachings and quoting and the lectures and stuff, and so that's how how I was taught, and so that's how I teach it sometimes. But I do my best to try to change it into something that's maybe a little bit more easier to understand. Well, while I'm up here, anyone have any questions? The Shinran, when he went to Mount Hiei and he was teaching, he was under the impression, or I guess, with the faith that what he was practicing was the correct thing, and he would get what he was promised or aspiring to get, and then realized at the end of it that it was all incorrect, that it wasn't the right way, it wasn't for him. And so then after that, he was able to realize that difference, and so he abandoned that path and then went onto the Nembutsu path, which was for him, and it helped him in that way. Very good. Okay. Yeah. All right. Any questions? Any other questions? Last chance. I'm just kidding. We do this every month, so you can wait. Okay. All right. In that case, we'll close with Gassho. If you could please join me in Gassho. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu.